Hey everyone, it's Jan Nadamoto here. I hope you enjoyed that song and the graphics, the pictures. I enjoyed making it with my son. When I gave him the pictures to use, he was totally confused and he asked me, look, what are you trying to do? What is your point here? So I explained to him that the pictures I selected were based on emotions, movement, memories, right? Because that's what I'm talking about today in my class. It's, the lobes of the brain, the limbic system, and movement. So then he said, well, I can't really use some of these because they're like, people are mad, angry. So anyway, I told him, just do what you want to do. Use what you feel because it's a happy song. He said, I can't use songs. So anyway, I do hope that you did enjoy that. All right. So today I'm going to talk to you about 3 parts of the brain: the lobes, limbic system, plus more, and nerves. And that's cranial nerves. Okay, so the cerebral cortex is divided into 4 lobes of the brain, making each of us unique. And deeper in the brain is the limbic system. It is under the cortex and above the brain stem. It connects the central nervous system to our limbs and organs, and it influences both the peripheral nervous system and the endocrine system. Excuse me. It's like a relay between the brain and spinal cord or brainstem and the rest of the body. So while the pineal gland and the pituitary glands are part of the limbic system, are not part of the limbic system, these are 2 extremely important glands that work with the limbic system, which is why I am including them in this presentation and my panels. So it links the nervous system to the endocrine system via the pituitary gland. So it's key to the various functions of the body, including interpreting emotional responses, storing memories, regulating hormones, sensory perception, motor function, and olfaction. Now, I'm not going to go into the endocrine system today, but let's just say that if the limbic system is not working properly, and because it influences the endocrine system, that there could be a trickle-down effect, especially because the hypothalamus, which is in the limbic system, communicates and directs the pituitary gland. And this in turn is a connection to the endocrine system and the nervous system. Okay. let's move on to the cranial nerves. So there are 12 pairs of nerves, and these are the nerves that emerge from the brain and exit the skull through holes. The peripheral nervous system connections with various organs and structures of the body are established through cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Okay, some of these cranial nerves only have sensory neurons, which means that they're basically receiving information but not sending anything back. However, most of these, as well as the spinal nerves, contains both motor and sensory nerves. Sensory neurons, sorry. So some of these, I'm sorry, so the cranial nerves are responsible for the control of a number of functions in the body, such as controlling eye movement, digestion, swallowing, and breathing. So, I hope that you can start to see the correlation between all of these, the lobes, the limbic system, and the nervous system. So, I know there's a lot more involved in all of this, but if we look at it this way, the 4 lobes are associated with different aspects of you. And the limbic system is key to regulating things. And then now how the nervous system is tied into the limbic system. And then in turn, how the nervous system is tied into the lobes. And the limbic system and the nervous system, right, works through your outer body. All right, so let's take a deeper look into the brain. There are 6 parts of the brain: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe, and the cerebellum, and the spinal cord. So today, in this presentation, I'm only covering the lobes. Okay. So the frontal lobe deals with movement, cognitive behaviors, motor functions, decision-making, problem solving or planning, reasoning, judgment, personality expression, memory, language and speech, and it contains the nerves that control the execution of voluntary movement, muscle movement. The parietal lobe receives and interprets sensory information from the body. So it deals with numbness, touch, temperature, pain, speech, reading and writing, math, body awareness, spatial orientation, and vision problems. It could also affect things like, recollection of names of items, impaired reading, difficulty talking, also deals with self-care skills such as dressing and washing, opening a door, combing your hair, putting on makeup, anything else that requires movement coordination. The temporal lobe organizes sensory input. So it deals with memory, speech, sound, language comprehension, emotional responses, visual perception, facial recognition, and the limbic system actually resides within the temporal lobe. So it resides in the mid-temporal lobe. So it's in between. Okay, the occipital. The occipital lobe makes sense of visual information. It helps with color recognition and movement. Now, And I don't. This is not as lengthy as the other ones, but you know, the occipital lobe deals with sight, right? And processing that information of what you see and take in. So it's actually very, very important lobe. Okay, so let's put this into perspective. So the visual information from the occipital lobe is sent to the parietal lobe and temporal lobe for processing. And then the parietal lobe can now use this visual information that it just received in conjunction with motor processes to perform such tasks as opening the door, brushing your teeth, combing your hair, things like that. And the temporal lobe helps to connect the visual information received with memories. So let's go on to the limbic system. Okay, plus more, right? Because I added on more. Okay, the limbic system are comprised of the amygdala, hippocampus, the cingulate gyrus, fornix, thalamus, hypothalamus, and basal ganglia. And that should be BASAL, ganglia. And I've added in, again, for the purposes here, I've added in the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. The limbic system is located in the middle of the head, as I mentioned earlier, in between the temporal lobe. And as I mentioned before, it connects the central nervous system to our limbs and organs. Okay, so the amygdala and hippocampus are the deeper structures of the limbic system. It's located under the hypothalamus, and combined, they process emotions and tie them to memories. The amygdala controls the brain's ability to coordinate endocrine, autonomic, and behavioral responses to emotional stimuli such as stress, anxiety, and fear. It also determines which memories are stored. So this is where conditioning and association occurs. The hippocampus sends short-term memories to long-term memories and retrieves the long-term memories when needed. The cingulate gyrus is involved in processing emotions and behavior and autonomic motor function regulation. So it helps coordinate sensory input with emotions, emotional responses to pain, regulates aggressive behavior, the communication of emotions, is even involved with maternal bonding, as vocalization is involved between mothers and children, or fathers and children, right? So doesn't it make sense that it all has connections with the amygdala, which processes emotions and relates them to particular events, which can add or take away from the bonding process? And of course, the hippocampus is intertwined in here because that's what turns short-term memories into long-term memories. Okay, so that's what we would consider, I guess, memory formation and storage. Okay, so we can also look at specific functions of the anterior and posterior sections of the cingulate gyrus. So the anterior cingulate gyrus is to aid in the decision-making process, and it does so by detecting errors and monitoring negative outcomes. This function helps us in planning appropriate actions and responses. The anterior cingulate gyrus and amygdala work together to form fear conditioning and memory association with sensory information received from the thalamus. So also when we experience fear, anger, or excitement, the anterior cingulate gyrus works with the hypothalamus to allow physiologic controls like the regulation of endocrine hormone release and autonomic functions of the peripheral nervous system. And some of these functions include heart rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure regulation. You got that? Okay. Now, the posterior cingulate gyrus plays a role in spatial memory, which involves ability to process information regarding the spatial orientation of objects in an environment. And it collects with the parietal lobes and temporal lobes. And these connections enable the posterior cingulate gyrus to influence functions related to movement, spatial orientation, and navigation. Additionally, connections with the midbrain and spinal cord allow the posterior cingulate gyrus to relay nerve signals between the spinal cord and brain. Okay. Next up is the thalamus and hypothalamus. The thalamus is located right above the hypothalamus. And the thalamus transfers the information collected from other parts of the brain to the part called the cerebral cortex, and is part of the brain segment called the diencephalon. So it's involved in learning and memory. It helps initiate or inhibit movement and helps in the learning, planning, and coordination of movement. Now, not only does the thalamus transfer the information, it also helps regulate sleep, alertness, and wakefulness. Okay, the hypothalamus is also part of the diencephalon, and it's part of the limbic system, and it plays a major role in regulating most hormones, having a relationship with the pituitary gland, adrenal glands, endocrine system, and our nervous system. It regulates metabolic processes, body temperature, hunger, fatigue, heart rate, breathing, etc. Additionally, it plays a major, if not critical and crucial role in the preservation of the body's homeostasis, because it dictates the secretion of different hormones from the pituitary gland. So it sends signals to the pituitary gland to start or stop secreting certain hormones, or just lower or increase the amount of hormones that are being secreted. And by doing this, this is how it tries to balance the body, keep it in a state of homeostasis. So this is a connection between the nervous system and the endocrine system. Okay, the fornix is a band of white matter nerve fibers that connect the hippocampus to the hypothalamus, as well as other parts of the brain. So there's still a lot of studying being done on this, and there is some speculation as to exactly what the additional purposes of the band is. They're looking at, well, they know, what they do know is that when they cut it, it does affect memory. Okay, so the basal ganglia, despite its name, it's not really a ganglia. It receives information from the cortex, processes it, and then sends it back to the cortex via the thalamus. So the basal ganglia facilitates movement and it inhibits competing movements. So when you reach for a pencil, the basal ganglia helps to facilitate the movement by allowing motor plans associated with that movement. So like reaching and grasping the pencil, reaching and grasping the pencil, to be activated. But at the same time, the basal ganglia causes motor plans that might counteract the movement, like flexing, right, to be inhibited. So it smooths out the movement. And there are also additional studies being done with the basal ganglia to see if it's also involved in habitual behavior, emotion, and cognition. Okay, the plus items. The pineal gland is part of the endocrine system, but is also a structure of the diencephalon. It connects the endocrine system with the nervous system in that it converts nerve signals from the sympathetic system of the peripheral nervous system into hormone signals. So that means that it's getting its signals from the hypothalamus, right? It's involved in several functions of the body, including the secretion of the hormone melatonin, regulation of endocrine functions, conversion of nervous system signals to endocrine signals, causes sleepiness. It influences sexual development and immune system function, and it also affects antioxidant activities. If the pineal gland produces too much melatonin, a person could experience low blood pressure, abnormal function of the adrenal and thyroid glands, or seasonal affective disorder, SAD. Actually, Dr. V did a talk on SAD earlier this month as well. So the pituitary gland, here, like the pineal gland, gets the signals from the hypothalamus. So the pituitary gland has jurisdiction over growth hormones, growth in almost all of your tissues, particularly bones and muscles, thyroid, adrenals, which in turn affects cortisol and other hormones, luteinizing hormones, which involves the production of estrogen and testosterone, endorphins, beta melanocyte stimulating hormone, which helps to stimulate increased pigmentation of your skin in response to ultraviolet radiation. And there are also hormones that are usually produced in the hypothalamus and stored in the posterior lobe until they are released, like vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone, which helps your body to conserve water and prevent dehydration, and oxytocin, which helps stimulate the release of breast milk and helps with contractions during labor. Okay, moving on to the 12 cranial nerves. The cranial nerves are nerves that arise from the brain and exit the skull through holes, which are called the crania foramina. And it exits the holes at its base rather than through the spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system connections with various organs and structures of the body are established through cranial nerves and spinal nerves. While some cranial nerves contain only sensory neurons, most cranial nerves and all spinal nerves contain both motor and sensory neurons. And I hope that makes sense to you. Okay. So I'm going to say that again. While some cranial nerves contain only sensory neurons, most cranial nerves and all spinal nerves contain both motor and sensory neurons. Okay, so there are two types of cranial nerves, sensory and motor. There are, so out of the 12 cranial nerves, 3 are sensory only, 5 are motor only, and 4 are mixed. So let's go through them now. So the olfactory, not olfactory, is a sensory nerve, and its jurisdiction is smell. It controls smell. The optic nerve is a sensory nerve only, and it deals with vision. The ocular motor is a motor nerve, right? And it deals with eye movement and pupil constriction. The trochlear is a motor nerve as well, and it has to do with eye movement. The trigeminal is motory and sensory, so it senses and it moves, acts as a motor nerve with mastication, somatosensory output, face, head, and neck. Yes, I don't know if you've ever come across anyone with trigeminal nerve damage or issues, but when the trigeminal, if you ever see people in pain, in facial pain, a lot, it probably is because of that trigeminal nerve, and it's very, very painful for people. Okay, the abducens is has to do with the motor function, and it controls eye movement. Okay, the abducens is a motor, and it controls eye movement. Facial is a motor and sensory nerve. It controls facial expression, sensory input from 2/3 of the tongue, which is your taste, and your ear. Vestibulocochlear is sensory only, and it controls your hearing and balance. Glossopharyngeal is motor and sensory, and it's partial swallowing in the back 1/3 of your tongue, which is sensory. Tonsil and pharynx. Vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body, and it's both sensory and motor, and it deals with motor, sensory, and autonomic functioning of the viscera, digestion, glandular secretion, and heart rate. Cranial accessory or spinal accessory is a motor function, and it deals with muscles in the head, which is movement of the head. Hypoglossal is a motor function or nerve, and it deals with the muscles of the tongue except for the palatoglossal, which is when you open your mouth, you look in the back towards your tonsils, you'll see an arch on the palate, the upper part of your mouth, and that's the palatoglossal. Okay. So now I hope that you see how all of this works even better. The 4 lobes, the limbic system, plus more, and the 12 nerves of the brain. And like I said earlier, There's much, much more to this, and it gets much more complicated. But these are the areas that I just wanted to go over today, and of course, what's included in my panels. Each of these things that I talked about today play major roles in our lives, and they are, if you could say, on a different level than what Dr. V talked about earlier this month. So my focus in this presentation and for my panels is on a broader basis. In other words, it's like looking at the forest first and then the trees. Looking at the bigger picture, or bigger organs or bigger parts, so to say, and then looking at and start drilling down, right? So Dr. V in her talks earlier today or this month, she really got into some nitty-gritty things like mitochondrial health and things like that. But the bottom line is, right, it all starts in the brain and it all ends in the brain. We're not chickens. We can't run without our heads or our brains, right? Chickens can run around without their heads, but we can't. Okay, so my 4 panels this month, actually, yeah, my 3 panels. I have 3 panels, and I'm calling them the brain basics. It includes the 4 lobes, which includes the both hemispheres, the limbic system plus, and it not only my panels not only include the pineal and oh my gosh, my brain just went pituitary, pineal and pituitary glands. But I've also included the pons, medulla oblongata, midbrain, and cerebellum because they also play a big part in how things work. It also includes the 12 cranial nerves, and I am including an instruction sheet with tips on how to use these panels when running your Life Insight app. And all of that for only $25. Now, where you can purchase these are paypal.me/Adori Wellness. And that link is included on the bottom of this presentation. Okay, so now I just wanted to mention some of the classes and panels that Dr. V presented earlier this month, as well as some of her upcoming classes. Because I think that what she presented was really super good, and everything just all ties in. Okay, so one of the talks that she did was on the super brain, and it specifically goes over using the Life Insight app to create an energetic shift for brain power. And I was actually in that class, and I did my panel on my I ran myself on my machine, and I really felt a shift in that, right? But it's good to follow along and learn how to the thought process, right? And how to use what you use and why you use what you use. Okay. So the next one is the emotional release class that she did using the Essential Oil app. And this ties into what I was just talking about today, which is emotions, right? And it could even go into memories, long-term memories, hippocampus. Let's see, because when we have so as a medical intuitive, we talk about emotional congestion, right? And so when we talk about that, what we mean is that there are pockets of emotion that can get stuck within our body. And by using the Essential Oil app, we can help release those emotions, because excuse me, because emotions can also be tied with frequencies, because frequencies are related to sense or smell, olfactory, right? It all ties in together, right? Okay, more on that later. But mitochondria health, she talks about, so these panels actually go into dealing with your cells on a very, very deep level and getting your cells to work better. So it can be used for the risk, injuries, stress, toxicity, spine, brain, I mean, everything, because everything are cells, right? We're made out of cells. And if our cells are not working properly, then our whole body's not going to be working properly, right? All right. So right now there is a dream course that we're doing, that she's doing. She is we're on her third week. This week is going to be our third week, tomorrow. And it helps to decode subconscious communication. Now, I never knew that my subconscious has so much to tell me. And I'm kind of happy about it, but but it is, I would say, it's pretty deep work. Yeah. So it helps you to uncover what your beliefs really are. Even though you can sit down and say, I believe that I am whatever it is, right? If your subconscious really doesn't believe it, it ain't gonna happen. And it ain't happening, right? How do you know that? Well, you can tell that by interpreting your dreams, asking your subconscious that, going to bed, putting the question in your head, addressing that to subconscious before you go to bed, dream it. Right? So your subconscious is talking to you, and get that information from you. Okay. All right. I just wanted to mention Inner Circle membership. So if you want to get deeper into working with your Life Insight app, then this is something that you might definitely want to consider. There's so much more information that's presented in this membership, and it will definitely take you to the next level in learning how to use the Life Insight app and provide you with so much more aha moments with the information and knowledge that's shared here. Okay, her Intuitive Insights course, this is not until next year, right? But she is running another special, right? Early bird's gone. I talked about that last month. You didn't take advantage of that? Too late. But she is actually having another special until the end of January. And this is the last one. After January, it goes to full price. But in this course, you'll go through 4 processes: a mistake, attention, judgment, higher mind, lower mind process. I can't even begin to say more. I am going to go again next year, because the information, it was so deep that, it's really hard to digest all the information at one time. But what I did was able to gain from that one time that I went was enough to allow me to use it and help other people with the process. But I still feel that I don't know. I'm not even scratching the tip of the iceberg here. But even to work on yourself and to realize what you're processing within you, and you don't even know it. I mean, it's amazing. So if you have any questions on it, contact Dr. V. Talk to her about it. If you have a question in your head, talk to her, call her. Yeah, highly recommend it. All right. So next week, Dr. Kim is going to be talking about mind over matter, beginning to bend reality. So that should be really interesting. All right, so I'm going to wrap up this presentation. All of the courses that I talked about, the links are below. So take a look at them. I highly recommend them. I wouldn't be bringing it up if I didn't really feel that it would help each and every one of you. Okay, so until next time, hui ho, and that's until we meet again in Hawaii. Take care.